Alright, welcome to part 2 of our guide, breaking right into World of Logs analysis for Boomkin DPS. What that is going to entail is I'll be looking at buffs gained, buffs cast, debuffs gained, debuffs cast, up times of these things when they happen, damage by actor, damage by spell, all the details you're going to need to learn exactly what I do, what all the Boomkins do, and actually this applies to any class. This is a really helpful video in my opinion. Figuring out what people do, when they do it, how their raid works to produce the best results you can. And so the first thing I just picked is the most simple thing to just try to give an example of the Traxian log. And you know, it's a pretty easy log. It's just stand still, kill the boss, you don't really move, you know, there aren't a lot of crazy phases, you know, you're not stunned or whatever, anything weird things. So it's going to be really easy to just take a look at this breakdown, see exactly what I'm doing. Alright, so if I want to break down DPS, first thing I'm going to look at, obviously in any log, I'll just take my own for an example, is going to be the buffs gained. Buffs gained is pretty simple. It's just all the auras over the course of the fight. You know, Bloodlust, any buffs you cast, any debuffs you cast, on a target, on you, on any target, they're going to show up right here. And this is probably the biggest part in understanding what goes on, especially with the Boomkin, where your buffs indicate, you know, what part of rotation you're in during what parts of the fight. So, the first thing I like to break down is looking at where the eclipses happen and when they happen relative to things like Bloodlust, your potions, your Starfall, and any other like extrinsic buffs you gain. For instance, on Madness of Deathwing, you're going to be gaining aspects of power and things like that, and those will all show up right here, and you can see exactly how they line up. The key to this is you see all these buffs here, the amount of times you gain the buff, the uptime in seconds over the total fight, which you can find the time of the fight being 424 for me in this particular fight, you know, the highest uptimes being 265 seconds, etc. And this last little row here is the most important one. This is actually, this hashtag is just a symbol key to show you, you know, where the uptime comes from during this fight. So I'll just look at totemic wrath as a baseline, which is a good idea of 100% uptime. So obviously the totem's down for the entire fight for me. I had this buff, the 10% spell power all fight long, and you can just judge all your buffs based on this. So let's take a look at, usually the first thing I like to go for is the eclipses. We got lunar eclipse that I gained and solar eclipse that I gained, and you can see obviously when they happen. Obviously they can't happen at the same time, so they're staggered like this. I started out in no eclipse on the Traxian. First thing I went to was solar, obviously rotated, single target, simple, you get the idea. You can see here the bars are different lengths and different separations for each eclipse, and that has to do with when I leave eclipse, how long I want to stay in, how long it takes me in between eclipses. Just that's gonna be on haste effects as well for a lot. We can bring up all those haste effects too, but I get a little messy. You can bring up things like velocity, which would be your Insignia of the Corrupted Mind trinket off of your Saj. You can bring up Nature's Grace. If only I could find it on here. You know, there's a long list. If you want to find all the buffs that you applied to yourself and to others during this fight, simplest way to go. So look at this entire list. What I'm trying to do, go into buffs cast. This is just a simpler, more cut down list of buffs game. And here you have basically the stuff that's you just from Boomkin here. You can see trinket, potions, power torrent, eclipses, nature's grace, shooting stars, etc. Things that you do particularly, not that the raid does as well. So if you wanted to look up, you can see velocity, your trinket here, when I casted Starfall, etc. When I use Berserk in my racial, all these things are super important to knowing, you know, how they line up with everything. Alright, after checking out buffs, you know, on your target, the next thing logically to look at is going to be debuffs that you apply, as well as your damage breakdown by spell. And simply all you do is, once you're in the details for a player, like we were before in the lowest game, just going to hit the damage by spell tab. And this is going to basically be how, you know, how many times you cast each spell, how many times it crits, your debuff uptime, you know, average ticks, and hits of everything to see exactly where the damage comes from. And I just have the Traxian log up here again still. Things that are important to look at for Boomkin would be your dot uptime, so you get Insect Swarm, Moonfire, Sunfire. Insect Swarm will obviously be higher because Moonfire, Sunfire are two dots combined will be the uptime of that spell. So you obviously 95% roughly for Insect Swarm, and then looking at a combined uptime of almost 95% for Moonfire as well. That's a rough guideline for a fight like Traxian, where I like to delay, particularly my style, which we already talked about. delay in 6 form part a little bit on single target rotation if it lines up to be that way. So 95% is a good baseline for something you want to look at for a particular fight. And that's what I would shoot for. 97, 98% for moving fights where you'd be redotting anyway and rotating around that. Another thing to look for, obviously, is if you want to compare, am I doing it right? Am I casting enough? I always look at with Boomkin logs. I get a lot of logs for traction specifically. Have been questions about that. Is the number of star stitches you're gonna cast, and with the 4P set bonus, it's gonna be a 10-second cooldown. So you'd be expecting to get 6 per minute, and if you're casting 6 per minute, or around 6 per minute, like you're averaging, if you do the math out, just about 6 per minute. That's very good for your DPS. If you do better than 6 per minute, like if you see here, I have 29 over a 4.5 minute fight, which is I think about almost 7 per minute. That's huge for your DPS. Obviously, Star Surge is your biggest hitting spell. Maximizing its damage is really important. So definitely one thing you would look at would be Star Surges per minute. You want at least 6 per minute. It's important. Other things, little various tricks and things here. Your wild mushrooms, how many things they hit when they crit. You see for Traxian, any log should have at least 3 hits just from pre-detonation of mushrooms, and you see staff damage. The only thing that's unpredictable here you can't really take into account is the hard cast staff procs. My Rat Starfire, Star Surges, anything but dots essentially that proc. You'll see them in the hits and crit section, but you can't see how many I casted versus the procs I got. And so there's a little bit of RNG you're not going to be able to look at. You can, but I'm not going to get into it in this video, how you can get into detail log analysis about that. If you've ever been interested in parsing or looking at parses or trying parses yourselves, one of the biggest things you'll notice is the AoE damage. The number one parse is always the person who's the best at doing the AoE damage. In a fight like Heroic Ragnaros, being in the reticles, managing your time, positioning, and damage to all the adds is crucial to getting a top parse. So we can definitely look at damage done to adds themselves, who's done the most damage, what they use, things like that, to get a good idea, the best method to do damage to adds. So you can bring up damage by actor for any character, and you can see who I did damage to and where I took damage from. And you see here in this parse, I did 70% of my damage to adds and 83% of my damage to Ragnaros. The best parses are probably going to be, on most fights, the ones where you do more percent of the damage to the adds than anyone else can, basically, because that's where your top damage comes from. So you can just bring up any add and see exactly what happened to them. I'll bring up Lava Scion because there's only 2, and you can generally get a good idea of what's going on at that time. You can see the damage from each spell that happened here. And there's a long list of spells, everything is going crazy on it, but if you look in your tops, usually you have a good idea of people doing the best damage, what they were doing. You can see there's a Sunfire and Insect Swarm, so the Boomkins were in Solar at that time, which gives you a good indicator that's where you should probably be if you are interested in what I'm doing. And if you actually want to see who's doing the most damage particularly, you can go with damage factor for the Lava Scion. And obviously Lava Scions are doing the most damage to the tanks. Tanks are tanking them, and then they're taking the most damage from these fallen people, how much damage they each dealt, the percent of the total damage done. Now that's good and all, but if you want to get a better idea of what exactly is happening per person, you can create a mini log, actually. What you want to do for that is basically, you can see here, this is the timeline for the entire fight. There's people dying, people being rezzed, this bloodlust bar, and all sorts of grass and things. So I'm going to filter away all these, we don't really need them right now. And I'll bring in this unhighlighted one, show creature deaths. What this is going to do is bring up all the adds that died over the fight. You see here, there's the first set of Sons of Flames for the hammer phase. Both molten elemental phases, we only had 2. And then going into the second Sons of Flames intermission along with Lava Scions here. So if I want to get a better idea of what happened during this time, I can actually you can zoom in around any of these parts and make a mini log right from it, and then it'll basically interact just like the regular world logs right now has it, but zoomed in, so you can see for a smaller window what you did. It's a better idea based around what's going on. So I'll just take this second intermission along with the bloodlust into Rag spawning up for phase 3. So So you have this highlighted, just hold on your left click and drag, and you can right click the selection and set paste your selection. What this will do is basically you go from the entire Ragnaros fight, you can see right here, it's changed to time range, in seconds, what happened. So we moved on to now this smaller selection. Sons of Flame spawn, Sons of Flame die, Lava Scions are up, Rag reappears, we Bloodlust on Rag, we kill the Lava Scions. That's essentially what happened in this small snippet that I took. And you want to check out, who did the most damage, what they do now. It's a lot easier to see because you can click on the players instead of the ads, and you can check out, what did I do, what buffs did I gain, what clips was I in, what time. And if you go to Lost Cast, like before, we already went over this, pretty easy to figure out. I'll check out Sated so you can see exactly when that Bloodlust happened. Other clips, things like that. Okay, so you can see right here, I was in Solar right until we Bloodlusted, and that gives you a good idea of where you should be, basically, to do the most damage to all your ads. And that's going to help you a lot, actually. If you know what to deal with for each set of ads, where the timing is, it helps you just nail down, milestones in a fight. So if I was thinking about Rag, the milestones would obviously be Sons of Flame #1 after the first phase, then multi-elementals, each one of those is a milestone. Basically, I want to be in solar eclipse for this, I want to be in solar eclipse for that, I want to be in lunar eclipse, etc. And then the next Sons of Flame, I want to be out of lunar, but I don't want to be in solar, I want to be getting to solar as Sons of Flame, are hitting the hammer and whatever, and then I want to go through solar, and then as Rag spawns, etc., I want to be leaving solar. So you can milestone yourself, and you can keep track of where you want to be at all times, and that really helps you to have a good plan. Having a good plan is very important to good DPS as a Boomkin on any fight where it's complicated in your Eclipse timing, especially like Heroic Rag is a very complicated fight for Eclipse timing.